When Dr. Caldwell looked me straight in the eye and said, "Someone is deliberately adding strong medication to your food," I felt my world collapse and rebuild in the same breath. For months, I'd been dizzy, confused, forgetting things, my own kids convincing me I was losing my mind. Sitting in that sterile office, I realized the two people I'd sacrificed everything for were systematically poisoning me to accelerate their inheritance. They wanted me weak, dependent. What they got instead was a former military officer who remembered exactly how ruthless he could be when the mission required it. The way I finish this mission will shock you to your core. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The medical center waiting room buzzed with that familiar sterile energy when Olivia squeezed my shoulder gently. "Dad, you okay? You look a little pale," she said, her voice filled with genuine concern. Lucas looked up from his phone, immediately pocketing it. "Yeah, Pop, we can reschedule if you're not feeling up to it." I felt a warmth in my chest. At 72, having kids who drop everything to drive across the city for their old man's doctor visits, it made all the sacrifices worth it. "You two didn't have to come," I said, though secretly I was grateful. These episodes had been getting worse. "Are you kidding?" Olivia laughed, that bright sound I'd loved since she was 5. "We're not letting you handle this alone. Remember when you used to drive me to every soccer practice, every game? Even worked overtime to afford those expensive cleats I just had to have?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "And all those years you helped me through college, covered my rent when that internship barely paid anything. We're here for you, always." Their words wrapped around me like a security blanket. For months, I'd been struggling with these mysterious symptoms, dizziness that sent me stumbling into walls, confusion that made me forget conversations minutes after having them, tremors that made my morning coffee ritual a dangerous endeavor. The doctors had run test after test, each one coming back inconclusive. "At your age, Mr. Harrison, these things can be complex," Dr. Peterson had said during my last visit. "We don't want to jump to conclusions without proper evidence." Translation: they had no idea what was wrong with me, but weren't willing to admit it. The episodes were getting more frequent, more severe. Yesterday, I'd stood in my own kitchen for 10 minutes, completely unable to remember what I'd come in there for. Olivia had found me there, gently guided me to a chair, made me tea with honey, just like I used to do for her when she was sick. "Mr. Harrison?" Dr. Caldwell's voice cut through my thoughts. He stood at the doorway to his office, his expression unreadable but somehow urgent. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" I started to stand, and both kids immediately moved to help me. "We'll come with you, Dad," Olivia said. But Dr. Caldwell shook his head firmly. "I'm sorry, but this needs to be a private consultation first, just a few minutes." The walk to his office felt longer than usual, my legs unsteady beneath me. Dr. Caldwell closed the door with deliberate care, then turned to face me with an expression I'd seen before, in briefing rooms when intelligence officers had information that would change everything. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The blood work we ran shows consistent traces of benzodiazepine and other sedative medications in your system. High levels. But here's the thing. You're not prescribed any of these medications." My hands gripped the armrests of the chair. "What are you saying?" "Someone is deliberately adding strong medication to your food or drink. The symptoms you've been experiencing, the confusion, dizziness, memory loss, they're not natural. They're induced." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Someone is systematically drugging you, Mr. Harrison." The room spun for a moment, and I gripped the chair harder. "Doctor, that's impossible. I live with my children. Olivia does all the cooking. She's incredibly attentive, makes sure I eat properly, and when she's busy with work, Lucas steps right in. They take care of everything." Dr. Caldwell's expression remained grave. "I understand this is difficult to process, but the lab results don't lie. These medications are consistent with what we'd see in cases of, well, let's call it intentional administration. The levels are too high and too consistent to be accidental contamination." I felt my military training kick in. Analyze the data, question assumptions, but don't dismiss intelligence just because it's uncomfortable. "You're absolutely certain?" No chance of lab error, contaminated samples? We ran the tests twice, used different labs. Mr. Harrison, someone with regular access to your food is doing this deliberately. He leaned back, studying my face. I know it's hard to accept, especially when it involves people you trust. My mind raced through the past months. Olivia's homemade soups when I felt unwell. Lucas bringing me my morning coffee in bed on weekends. Their concerned faces when I'd stumble or forget things. The way they'd exchange glances when I had an episode, then quickly cover it with worry. If if someone were doing this, I said carefully, how would I stop it? What's the recovery process? Dr. Caldwell pulled out a notepad. First, you need to eliminate the source completely. Prepare your own food, drink only sealed beverages you open yourself. The good news is that these medications will clear your system within a few days to a week once you stop ingesting them. Your symptoms should improve dramatically. He handed me the paper with detailed instructions. But Mr. Harrison, if someone is doing this intentionally, you need to be very careful about how you handle the situation. Document everything. Consider involving authorities. I folded the paper, slipping it into my jacket pocket. 3 decades in military intelligence had taught me one crucial lesson. Never reveal your hand until you understand the full scope of the operation. Doctor, I'd prefer to investigate this quietly first. Make sure I understand what's really happening before making any accusations. Of course. But please, be careful. And if your symptoms worsen or you feel unsafe, don't hesitate to call emergency services. Walking back to the waiting room, I felt like I was moving through fog, but not the same confusion I'd experienced for months. This was the fog of a tactical situation requiring assessment. I needed to observe, to test, to confirm what seemed impossible. Olivia jumped up the moment she saw me. Dad, how did it go? You look upset. Lucas stood beside her, both their faces masks of perfect concern. Yeah, Pop, what did Dr. Caldwell say? Do they finally know what's wrong? I looked at them, really looked, and for the first time in months, I felt completely clear-headed despite the drugs in my system. He says it's still unclear, wants to run more tests next week. The symptoms might get worse before they get better. I watched their faces carefully. Was that a flicker of satisfaction in Olivia's eyes? Did Lucas's shoulders relax just slightly? Oh no, Olivia said, taking my arm. Well, don't worry. We'll take even better care of you. I'll make sure you're eating regularly, getting your vitamins. Absolutely, Lucas added. We're not going anywhere, Dad. We'll get through this together. As we walked to the car, my mind was already shifting into operational mode. For the first time in months, I had a mission with clear parameters, and like every successful operation I'd ever run, it would require patience, careful observation, and flawless execution. They thought they were caring for a confused, deteriorating old man. They had no idea they were now under surveillance by someone who'd spent decades identifying and neutralizing threats. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. That first morning back home, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My hands were shaking, not from the drugs this time, but from pure fury mixed with disbelief. How do you wrap your mind around the fact that your own children are slowly poisoning you? The oatmeal Olivia brought me looked exactly like it always did. Innocent, wholesome. Extra blueberries today, Dad. They're good for brain health, she said with that same loving smile that had fooled me for months. Thank you, sweetheart. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I managed a few spoonfuls while she watched, praising her cooking. The moment she left, I rushed to the bathroom and forced myself to vomit. Not exactly the sophisticated military tactics I had hoped to employ, but desperation makes you resourceful. The coffee was harder. Lucas liked to sit with me while I drank it, talking about his work, asking about my day. I had to get creative, spilling some while gesturing, claiming I was too full, saving half for later. He seemed pleased that I was drinking slowly, taking my time. Of course he was. My first attempt at searching the house was a disaster. I was so nervous about being caught that I barely made it through Olivia's dresser before hearing her car in the driveway. My heart pounded like I was back in basic training, fumbling through a night exercise. Some elite officer I was turning out to be. It took me 3 days to find the prescription bottle in her bathroom, and only because I accidentally knocked over her moisturizer and it rolled behind the cabinet. Janet Morrison. Who the hell was that? The name meant nothing to me, but the medication label made my stomach turn. Lorazepam, anxiety medication that could easily be crushed into food. Finding the research in Lucas's room felt like a punch to the gut, not just because of what it meant, but because of how thorough he'd been. Articles printed and highlighted, notes scribbled in margins about inheritance law and mental competency requirements. My son, who I'd put through business school, who used to call me for advice about everything, had been researching how to legally steal my life. But the conversation I overheard that nearly broke me completely. I'd gone upstairs claiming exhaustion, another performance in what had become my daily acting routine. But something made me pause at the top of the stairs. Maybe it was old instincts, maybe just paranoia. I crouched there like some pathetic spy in my own house, straining to hear their voices from the living room. God, I'm so tired of this charade, Olivia said, and the venom in her voice made me flinch. This wasn't the daughter who used to fall asleep on my lap during movie nights. I know, right? And the way he looks at us with those grateful puppy dog eyes every time we bring him food. It's actually disgusting. Lucas's laugh was cold, unrecognizable. I had to grip the banister to keep from falling down the stairs. These were my children. My children. 6 months, the lawyer said. 6 months of documented decline and we can start proceedings. But honestly, Lucas, I don't know if I can keep pretending to care for 6 more months. The doses are working faster now, though. Did you see him yesterday, trying to remember where he put his glasses when they were on his head? Maybe we can speed this up. 6 months. They had a timeline, a plan, and I was just, what? An obstacle? A paycheck? When Olivia mentioned the downtown condo and my life insurance, something inside me went very quiet and very cold. This wasn't grief anymore. This wasn't shock. This was the moment I stopped being a heartbroken father and became something else entirely. I made it back to my room before the tears came. 30 years of military service, and I was crying in my bedroom like a broken old man. It felt strange. I hadn't cried like this since my wife's funeral 15 years ago. Maybe it was the emotional instability, those damn drugs still clawing their way out of my system. But by morning, the tears had hardened into something far more dangerous. They wanted to play games with their old man? Fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail about their target. I didn't just serve in the military. I served in intelligence, and I was very, very good at my job. The clarity that came with a drug-free system was like switching from a broken radio to high-definition television. Every detail sharp, every sound crystal clear. And what I saw and heard made my next moves inevitable. But anger without evidence is just noise. I needed proof that would hold up in court, documentation that would destroy them legally, not just emotionally. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about systematic destruction of their entire plan. The first thing I did was start collecting samples. Every meal they brought me, every cup of coffee, every vitamin smoothie Olivia insisted with my recovery. I'd eat just enough to avoid suspicion, then carefully transfer portions into small containers I'd bought during a solo trip to the pharmacy. Each sample felt like gathering ammunition for a war I was finally ready to fight. Dr. Caldwell's voice was cautious when I called him, like a man walking through a minefield. Mr. Harrison, I understand your concerns, but testing food samples for criminal evidence isn't typically. Doctor, I interrupted, my voice carrying the same authority I'd used when briefing subordinates on life or death missions. Someone is systematically poisoning me in my own home. I need official documentation that will hold up in court, not speculation, not assumptions, hard evidence. The silence on the other end stretched like a taut wire before he responded. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted completely, the hesitation replaced by grim determination. If these tests show what I think they will, we'll need to involve law enforcement immediately. Soon, doctor, but first I need all the pieces in place. I felt like a sniper adjusting his scope, patience and precision more valuable than speed. Next, I needed backup. Not the kind that comes with badges and bureaucracy, but the kind forged in foxholes and sealed with blood. I started with Frank Riley, my old unit sergeant major. The phone barely rang once before his gravelly voice filled the line. Harrison, you old bastard. Frank's laugh was like coming home after a long deployment. What kind of trouble are you in now? My throat tightened unexpectedly. Must still be the lingering effects of those damn drugs making me emotional. The kind where family stops being family, Frank. I need some assistance with surveillance and evidence gathering. Off the books. The line went dead quiet. In that silence, I could almost hear Frank's mind working, processing threat levels and tactical requirements. When he spoke again, his voice had the same steel I remembered from our worst days overseas. What do you need? Someone to watch my house when I'm not here. Someone who knows how to document everything without being seen. And someone who can make sure certain evidence doesn't disappear if things go sideways. Consider it done. No questions, no hesitation. This was why brotherhood forged in combat was stronger than blood. Mike Torres is retired and living about an hour from you. He's been bored out of his mind since leaving the service. This will give him something to focus on. The second call was to Tommy Chen, our old communications specialist. His voice crackled with curiosity when I explained what I needed. Recording devices, cameras, the kind of stuff that doesn't show up on any purchase records. How serious are we talking here? Tommy's question came with the weight of someone who'd seen enough operations go sideways to know when to ask. Life and death serious. The words tasted bitter, like admitting defeat in a battle I should have seen coming. Jesus, Harrison. Tommy's exhale was sharp. I'll have a package delivered tomorrow, completely untraceable. And Harrison, watch your six out there. But the most important call was to my lawyer, James Peterson. We'd served together briefly before he left for law school, and hearing his familiar voice felt like finding an oasis in hostile territory. James, I need to make some changes to my estate planning. Major changes, and I need them documented in a way that can't be contested or reversed. Of course. When would you like to come in? His professional tone couldn't quite mask the concern creeping through. Tonight. After hours. This needs to be completely confidential until I say otherwise. I felt like I was calling in an airstrike on my own position. That evening, sitting in James's office with the blinds drawn, I laid out everything. The medical evidence, the overheard conversations, the systematic poisoning. With each detail, James's face grew darker, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Jesus, Harrison? Your own children? His voice cracked slightly, the lawyer's composure slipping to reveal the old soldier underneath. The words felt like swallowing broken glass. I need them completely removed from the will. Everything goes to the veterans community. Housing programs, medical support, educational scholarships, and I want it ironclad. No legal challenges, no loopholes, no matter what happens to me. James pulled out a legal pad, his pen moving with surgical precision. I'll draft something that would make it impossible for them to contest, even if they had the best lawyers money could buy. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the same intensity I'd seen in combat medics working on wounded soldiers. But Harrison, if this is really happening, you need to involve the police. I will. But first, I want them to know they've lost. I want them to understand exactly how completely they've destroyed their own lives. I leaned forward, feeling the predator awakening after months of playing prey. They thought they were playing chess with a confused old man. I'm going to show them what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight. 3 days later, Dr. Caldwell's call came like the confirmation of enemy contact I'd been expecting. His voice was grim, professional, the tone of someone delivering bad news with military efficiency. Mr. Harrison, every sample tested positive for lorazepam and zolpidem. The concentrations are high enough to seriously impair cognitive function and consistent enough to indicate systematic, deliberate administration. My hands clenched into fists, muscle memory from years of controlling rage in impossible situations. Will this hold up in court? It's airtight. Chain of custody is perfect. Lab certification is impeccable. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I'm required by law to report this to the authorities. Not yet, doctor. Give me 1 more week. I want to make sure they can't destroy any evidence or flee before the hammer drops. I felt like a sniper with the target in his crosshairs, finger on the trigger, waiting for the perfect moment. That night, I sat in my study, the same room where I'd helped both kids with their homework for years, and finalized my strategy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd taught them to think strategically, to plan ahead, to consider consequences. Now, I was about to show them what happened when the student tried to outwit the master. Phase 1 was complete. I had evidence, legal protection, and backup. Phase 2 would be much more interesting. They thought they were hunting me. But hunters don't realize they've become prey until the trap snaps shut, and I was about to spring the most devastating trap of their lives. Mike Torres arrived on a Tuesday morning looking exactly like what he was, a retired Special Forces operator pretending to be a handyman. His cover story was perfect. He was helping me with some home repairs while I recovered from my health issues. Olivia and Lucas bought it completely, probably relieved that someone else was taking some responsibility for their burdensome father. What they didn't know was that Mike had installed micro cameras throughout the house within his first hour there. Military grade surveillance equipment hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, even the coffee maker. Every room except the bathrooms was now under observation, with feeds going directly to a secure server that James was monitoring from his office. "Your kids are sloppy," Mike told me quietly as we pretended to examine the kitchen cabinets. "The girl doesn't even try to hide what she's doing when she makes your food. Yesterday, I watched her crush pills right there on the counter, mix them into your soup like she was adding salt." The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. In combat, you expect the enemy to try to kill you. But watching your own daughter poison your food with the same care she used to put into making you birthday cakes, that was a special kind of warfare. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Package confirmed, all documentation secure, ready for next phase." Tommy's equipment had arrived, and more importantly, everything was being recorded and backed up in multiple locations. That afternoon, Olivia brought me my usual medication smoothie, a blend she claimed would help with my memory and balance. She stood there watching as I lifted it to my lips, her eyes following every movement with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "This one tastes different," I said, lowering the glass slightly, "sweeter than usual." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I added some extra honey. You've seemed so tired lately. I thought the natural sugars would help." What she'd actually added, according to Mike's footage, was a double dose of crushed zolpidem. "You're so thoughtful," I replied, taking another fake sip. The lies rolled off both our tongues like we were reading from a script. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't worry, Dad. I'll always take care of you." The words dripped with false sweetness, but her eyes held the cold calculation of a predator measuring its prey. That evening, Lucas suggested we watch a movie together, just like old times. He'd chosen The Departed, probably thought the irony was hilarious. As we sat there, him thinking he was watching his confused father slowly succumb to his and his sister's plan, I was actually recording everything through Tommy's hidden devices. "You know, Pop," Lucas said during a particularly violent scene, "life's funny. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who end up betraying you." I looked at him, really looked, and saw a stranger wearing my son's face. "That's true," I replied quietly, "but betrayal has a way of coming back around. People who think they're clever usually find out they're not quite as smart as they believed." Something flickered in his eyes then, uncertainty maybe, but he quickly covered it with that same false concern he'd been wearing for months. By Friday, I had enough evidence to put them both away for attempted murder, but I wasn't ready to end this yet. They'd been playing a long game with my life. Now it was time for them to experience what it felt like to be the one slowly losing everything. I started with small things. The Wi-Fi password mysteriously stopped working, forcing them to use their phone data. The hot water heater developed an intermittent problem that Mike was trying to diagnose. Little inconveniences that added up to constant irritation. But the real psychological warfare began when I started forgetting things on purpose, but the wrong things. I'd forget where I put my reading glasses, but remember obscure details about their childhood that I hadn't mentioned in years. I'd forget what day it was, but suddenly recall the exact amount of their college tuition payments. "Dad, do you remember what you had for breakfast?" Olivia asked one morning, her voice carrying that patronizing tone she probably thought was caring. "Toast with marmalade," I replied immediately, though she'd brought me oatmeal. "But I was just thinking about when you were 8 and insisted on making me breakfast in bed for Father's Day. You were so proud of those burned pancakes." I smiled at the memory, then let my expression grow confused. Or was that Lucas? My memory isn't what it used to be. I watched her face carefully. For just a moment, genuine emotion flickered across her features, guilt, maybe even love. But it was quickly replaced by frustration. The unpredictability was clearly bothering her more than the expected decline. That night, I heard them arguing in hushed voices downstairs. "This isn't working fast enough," Olivia hissed. "We need to increase the doses again. What if we give him too much? What if something permanent happens?" Lucas sounded nervous, his voice cracking like it had when he was a teenager caught in a lie. Would that really be so terrible? Think about it. No more waiting, no more pretending. Problem solved, and we can finally move on with our lives. I gripped the stair railing so hard I thought it might snap. In that moment, I realized they weren't just trying to incapacitate me. They had crossed a line I never imagined my own children would even approach. The casual way Olivia discussed permanent solutions sent ice through my veins. The next morning, I made a call to Detective Sarah Williams, Frank's daughter, who worked in the police department's financial crimes unit. "Sarah, it's John Harrison. I need to discuss something sensitive with you. Something that involves family." Her voice sharpened immediately. She'd inherited her father's instincts. "What kind of family situation, Mr. Harrison?" "The kind where attempted murder meets inheritance fraud. Can you meet me somewhere private?" And Sarah, this conversation never happened until I say it did. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was no longer angry. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford in a war zone. What I felt now was the cold, calculated determination of a soldier who'd identified the enemy and was ready to complete the mission. They'd taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones most willing to destroy you. But they'd forgotten an even more important lesson. I'd spent 30 years learning how to destroy people who threatened what I cared about. And I was damn good. The moment came on a Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after my conversation with Dr. Caldwell. I sat at the breakfast table, watching Olivia prepare what she thought would be another dose of my slow destruction. Lucas was scrolling through his phone, probably checking his bank balance and dreaming of his inheritance. I pushed away the oatmeal she just placed in front of me. "I'm not hungry," I said quietly. "Dad, you need to eat. The doctor said maintaining your nutrition is important for your recovery." Her voice carried that practiced concern, but I could hear the irritation underneath. She needed me to eat that oatmeal. "Which doctor, Olivia?" I looked up at her, and for the first time in months I let her see exactly how clear my eyes were. "Dr. Caldwell? The one who told me that someone has been systematically poisoning me for the past 6 months?" The spoon clattered from her hand onto the kitchen counter. Lucas's phone froze mid-scroll. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Her voice was steady, but I watched the color drain from her face like water from a broken dam. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table with deliberate care. "Lab results. Every meal, every smoothie, every cup of coffee you've brought me for the past 3 weeks. All of them testing positive for lorazepam and zolpidem." I opened the folder, revealing page after page of official documentation. Enough medication to incapacitate an elephant, let alone a confused old man. Lucas started to stand up, but something in my expression made him sink back into his chair. "We don't... this is crazy. Why would we?" "For the inheritance, son." The word son tasted bitter on my tongue. "Though I have to admit, your research was thorough. How long does it take to establish cognitive decline for legal purposes? That was a particularly enlightening article I found in your desk drawer." Olivia's facade finally cracked. "You went through our things? You had no right." "I had no right." My voice dropped to the same tone I'd used with enemy combatants during interrogations. "I had no right to investigate why I was losing my mind in my own home, why my own children were watching me stumble around like a broken puppet and pretending to be concerned." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see them calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, whether they could still salvage this somehow. "I heard you talking, by the way," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, "about how tired you were of pretending to care, about increasing the doses, about permanent solutions." Lucas's hands were shaking now. "Dad, if you would just let us explain." Explain what? I leaned forward, studying their faces like I was reading an enemy's battle plans. Explain how you convinced me to let you move in here under the pretense of caring for your aging father. Explain how you researched the exact medications that would make me compliant and confused. Or maybe explain how you discussed whether it would be so terrible if something permanent happened to me. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but I'd seen enough crocodile tears from her to last a lifetime. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Lucas has debts, and I've been struggling with the business. So you decided to drug me into incompetence and steal my life? I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 72 years, but also feeling more dangerous than I'd felt since leaving the service. Here's what I don't understand. What did I do wrong? They both stared at me in confusion. Seriously, I continued, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts to stay controlled. What did I do as a father that made you think I wouldn't help you if you just asked? When have I ever said no when you needed something? When have I ever made you feel like you couldn't come to me with problems? Lucas started crying then. Real tears this time, not manipulation. Dad, we just thought. You thought what? That I'd judge you? That I'd lecture you about responsibility? I felt my own eyes burning, probably still the lingering effects of their drugs making me emotional. Lucas, when you were 12 and broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball, who covered for you? When you crashed my car in college, who paid for the repairs without saying a word? When you needed money for that business venture that failed, who helped you without asking questions? We know, Dad. We and Olivia. I turned to my daughter, this stranger, wearing my little girl's face. When you wanted to quit that job you hated and start your own business, who gave you the startup money? When you needed someone to co-sign your apartment lease, who was there? When you called crying about that boyfriend who cheated on you, who drove 4 hours just to bring you ice cream and let you cry on his shoulder? She couldn't meet my eyes. Daddy, we never meant for it to go this far. We just needed... You needed what? Money? All you had to do was ask. Love? I gave you everything I had. Respect? I've been proud of you every day of your lives, even when you made mistakes. My voice was getting louder, 30 years of controlled military discipline finally cracking. So tell me, what did I do that made you think the best solution was to slowly poison me into incompetence so you could steal everything I'd worked for? The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of Lucas's quiet sobbing. Olivia was staring at her hands, tears dropping onto the table. She started, then stopped. We thought it would be easier than what? Than being honest with your father? Than treating me like a human being instead of an obstacle? Than disappointing you again? Lucas whispered, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I felt something break inside my chest. Not anger, but something deeper and more painful. Disappointing me, son? The only thing that could ever truly disappoint me is finding out that my children thought so little of me and so little of themselves that they'd rather commit attempted murder than have an honest conversation. That's when we heard the cars pulling into the driveway. Multiple engines, car doors slamming, the sound of heavy footsteps on the front porch. I looked at my children, my poisoners, my would-be killers, the two people I'd loved more than my own life, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. That would be Detective Williams and her team, I said quietly. I called them this morning, gave them all the evidence, the lab results, the recordings, the video footage of you preparing my food. I stood up as the doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy knocking. I wanted to ask you that question first. Before they took you away, I needed to understand what I did wrong. The knocking became pounding. Police, open up! Olivia looked at me with something that might have been desperation or might have been rage. Dad, please, you can't do this. We're your children. I walked toward the front door, then paused and looked back at them one last time. No, I said quietly. My children would never have tried to poison their father. I don't know who you people are. 3 weeks later, I sit on my back porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, a cup of coffee in my hands that I made my kitchen that belongs only to me. The silence isn't the oppressive quiet of a house filled with lies. It's the peaceful silence of a man who finally knows exactly where he stands. The arraignment was swift and brutal. Both children were denied bail. The judge called their crime a systematic attempt to destroy a vulnerable family member's mental capacity for financial gain. Lucas broke down completely when they read the charges. Olivia sat stone-faced, as if she still couldn't believe she'd been caught. Their lawyers have already started calling, fishing for plea deals, hinting at reduced sentences if I'd be willing to show leniency. I told James to give them a simple message. Mr. Harrison's position is that attempted poisoning deserves the full weight of the law, regardless of family relationships. The trial won't be for months, but I've already given my deposition. The hardest part wasn't describing the physical symptoms or the fear I'd felt when I thought I was losing my mind. The hardest part was answering the prosecutor's question about how this had affected my relationship with my children. There is no relationship, I'd said, looking directly at the camera recording my testimony. The children I raised, the ones I thought I knew, those people never existed. These are strangers who happen to share my DNA and my dinner table. I blocked their phone numbers the day after their arrest, changed my house phone number. When their lawyers mentioned they wanted to write me letters from jail, I told James to return any correspondence unopened. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. The veterans community has been incredible. The housing program I'm funding just approved its first facility. The scholarship program has its first group of applicants. The medical support fund is already covering treatments that the VA couldn't provide for 3 veterans who served their country and deserved better. Every dollar that my children thought they were entitled to is now making a real difference in the lives of people who actually earned it. I've started volunteering at the local VA center, helping other veterans navigate the transition to civilian life. It's strange how planning to give away everything I once intended to leave to my children has made me feel richer than I've ever been. Maybe that's the real lesson here. The things we think we're protecting for family only have value when they're given freely, not stolen in the dark. Frank Riley stops by most weekends. We sit on the same porch, drinking coffee and talking about everything except the obvious. Yesterday, he brought his granddaughter, a bright 8-year-old who reminded me what it was like to have a child look at you with genuine love instead of calculating interest. You ever think you'll change your mind? Frank asked after his granddaughter had fallen asleep in the hammock between us. About cutting them off completely? I thought about it for a long time before answering. I think about the children they used to be, but those children grew up to become adults who thought poisoning their father was easier than talking to him. I can't save the people they used to be by enabling the people they became. The truth is more complicated than that, of course. There are moments, usually late at night, when the house feels too empty, when I remember birthday mornings and Christmas presents and bedtime stories. When I remember teaching Lucas to drive or helping Olivia with her first job interview. But those moments pass because nostalgia is a luxury I can't afford when it comes to people who were willing to drug me into dementia for money. Dr. Caldwell checks in on me weekly, more as a friend now than as a doctor. My cognitive function returned completely within weeks of stopping their poisoning regimen. My balance is steady, my memory is sharp, and the tremors that had worried me so much have disappeared entirely. It's amazing how quickly the body heals when it's not being systematically attacked by the people who are supposed to protect it. Mike Torres finished installing the new security system yesterday. Just in case, he said, though we both knew it wasn't really necessary. My children are in jail awaiting trial, and their friends, what few they had, want nothing to do with this scandal. But the cameras and alarms give me peace of mind, and after what I've been through, peace of mind is worth more than gold. These days I sleep well. I eat food I prepare myself, drink coffee I brew myself, and make decisions about my life without wondering if my judgment is being clouded by chemicals someone slipped into my breakfast. I've rediscovered the simple pleasure of trusting my own mind, of knowing that when I forget where I put my keys, it's just normal human forgetfulness, not evidence that someone is slowly stealing my sanity. The lesson I've learned isn't about trust or family or forgiveness. It's simpler and more brutal than that. Some people will take everything you're willing to give them, and then they'll take more. The only protection you have is the willingness to cut them off completely when they cross lines that should never be crossed. My children taught me that love without boundaries isn't love, it's enablement. And enablement, taken to its logical conclusion, becomes complicity in your own destruction. I miss the children they used to be, but I don't miss the adults they became. And I finally made peace with the fact that those are two completely different things. As the sun climbs higher and the mountains fade from gold to their everyday blue, I finish my coffee and head inside to start another day. A day where every decision is mine, every meal is safe, and every person in my life has earned the right to be there. It's a good life. Not the life I planned, but the life I chose when I finally learned the difference between being alone and being free. And sometimes, being free is worth everything you have to give up to get there.